This lesson is going to be on greatest common factor and factoring by grouping. The essential question for this lesson is, how do you factor out the greatest common factor, and how do you factor by grouping? Well, the first question to ask is, what do we mean by the greatest common factor? Well, I think the easiest way to answer that is to look at an example. So let's start with the example 8x plus 12. What is the greatest common factor for 8x plus 12? Well, the answer is 4 because it is the greatest factor that divides into both 8x and 12. So if we factor 4 from each term, we get 4 times 2x plus 4 times 3. And remembering the distributive property, our final result is 4 parentheses 2x plus 3. So now let's look at another example. Let's say we've got 9x squared plus 12x to the third. What is the greatest common factor that I can take out that's common to both 9x squared and 12x to the third? Well, the 9 and the 12, obviously the greatest common factor there is 3. But I've got x squared and x to the third. Well, the greatest common factor there is x squared. So if we were to look at this, the result would be, so our result would look something like this. 3x squared, parentheses, 3 plus 4x. Now you can always check to make sure that you factored correctly by simply going backwards and using the distributive property, multiplying this out. So if we look at this, we got 3x squared times 3. Well, that's 9x squared, which is what we had originally. Then we got 3x squared times 4x, which gives me 12x to the third, which is what we had originally. So therefore, we know that we have factored this correctly. So now let's look at another example. Let's look at the example of 3x minus 2 times x plus 1 plus 3x minus 2 times 2x minus 5. Well, if we look at this closely, we can see that we have a common factor here. We have 3x minus 2 here. We also have 3x minus 2 here. So I can factor the 3x minus 2 out. So the result looks something like this. We factored 3x minus 2 out of both. So we get 3x minus 2, parentheses, parentheses x plus 1, plus, parentheses, 2x minus 1, parentheses, parentheses. So anything that's common, you can factor out. In fact, whenever you are factoring, the very, very, very first thing you should do is always look to see if there's anything common that you can factor out. Now, I would like you to look at this expression, 25x to the second, y to the third, plus 30y to the fifth, minus 15x to the 4, y to the seventh. I would want you to find the greatest common factor for this expression and post your answer in the drop box. So now we would like to talk about a different subject, and that is factoring by grouping. What do we mean by that? Now look at this expression. I've got ax plus ay plus bx plus by. Now, if I look at the total expression, there's nothing common in all 4 terms. But if I look at the first 2 terms, namely these right here, ax plus ay, I'll notice that there is a common, that a is common to both of those terms. And then if I look at bx plus by, I can see that b is common to both of those terms. So I could factor an a out of the first and a b out of the second. So once I factor the a and the b out, I've got a times x plus y plus b times x plus y. Well, now, if you look closely, you'll see that each of these 2 terms have a common element, x plus y, which now I can factor that out. Now our factored expression looks something like this. X plus y, which was what was common in the previous expression, times what's left, a plus b. This is, in general terms, what we mean by factor by grouping. So now let's look at another example. Let's say we got 10ax minus 5ay plus 10bx minus 5by. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at these first two terms and see if there's anything common there, and then look at the second two terms and see if there's anything common there. So looking at the first two terms, what's common? 5a, so I can factor the 5a out, which leaves 2x minus y. And let's look at the second term. What's common there? 5b, I can take the 5b out. And what do I have? Well, if you look closely, what you've got here is we have the same thing. We have 2x minus y and 2x minus y. So now I can factor the 2x minus y out. So our final result comes out to be parentheses 2x minus y times parentheses 5a plus 5b. So here is an example of factor by grouping. Factor by grouping, basically, first thing you're going to do is you're going to have four terms if you do factor by grouping. And look if there's anything common in two of the terms and anything else common in the other two terms, that once you factor those out, you should end up with the same term in both that you can in turn factor out. So in our example case, we looked on the left two terms, 10ax minus 5ay. We noticed we could take a 5a out. The right two terms, we noticed we could take a 5b out. What are we left with in both cases was 2x minus y, which now we can take that out and have our final result, 2x minus y times 5a plus 5b.